What happens when the goddess of love falls in love? It's never simple. Today, we're exploring the top 5 lovers of Aphrodite, a deep dive into love, betrayal, and divine drama from ancient Greek mythology. We're talking Ares, the god of war, whose affair with Aphrodite caused an epic scandal. We'll discover the tragic love for Adonis, a mortal so beautiful, not even death could stop Aphrodite's devotion. Next, we'll uncover her history-altering relationship with Anchises, a Trojan prince. Then, we'll examine her unconventional marriage to Hephaestus, her own husband. And finally, we'll reveal her forbidden romance with Hermes, the messenger god, and the unique deity they created. Get ready for passion, heartbreak, and pure Olympian drama. By the end, you'll see why Aphrodite is truly one of mythology's most fascinating and complex figures. But first, let's understand her. Aphrodite's origin is dramatic, born from the sea foam after Cronus castrated Uranus and threw his genitals into the ocean. She emerged fully grown and incomparably beautiful, but this violent birth hints at a powerful, perhaps darker, nature beneath her stunning exterior. Furthermore, Aphrodite wasn't just about gentle romance and tender affection. She embodied all aspects of love, the passionate, the destructive, the obsessive, and the transformative. Her power could inspire the deepest devotion or the most devastating jealousy. She could bless unions with eternal happiness or curse them with tragedy and loss. Additionally, the goddess operated by her own rules, often disregarding the social conventions that governed both mortals and immortals. Marriage vows, social status, and even the natural order of life and death meant little to her when desire called. This made her simultaneously beloved and feared throughout the ancient world. What's more, Aphrodite's influence extended far beyond simple romantic entanglements. She was connected to fertility, beauty, pleasure, and the creative force that drives all life. Her decisions in matters of the heart often had far-reaching consequences for mortals and gods alike, shaping the fates of kingdoms and the outcomes of great wars. Consequently, when we examine her lovers, we're not just looking at romantic relationships. We're exploring the very forces that drive human nature and divine will. Each affair reveals different facets of her character and different aspects of love itself. Our journey begins with perhaps the most mysterious and least documented of Aphrodite's great loves, her affair with Hermes, the quick-witted messenger of the gods. While ancient sources provide fewer details about this relationship compared to her other famous liaisons, the union between the goddess of love and the god of communication, travel, and cunning created ripples that extended throughout Greek mythology. The attraction between Aphrodite and Hermes was perhaps inevitable. Both deities shared certain qualities that made them natural partners in mischief and desire. Hermes, with his silver tongue and ability to move between worlds, possessed the kind of charm and unpredictability that appealed to Aphrodite's adventurous nature. Meanwhile, she offered him something that his usual domain of messages and commerce couldn't provide: pure, intoxicating passion. Moreover, their relationship represented a fascinating contrast of energies. Where Aphrodite embodied the overwhelming force of attraction and desire, Hermes represented communication, wit, and the ability to navigate complex situations with cleverness rather than raw power. Together, they created a dynamic that was both intellectually stimulating and physically irresistible. According to some versions of the myth, their union was blessed by Zeus himself, who saw the potential for their combined powers to serve the needs of both gods and mortals. Hermes' ability to deliver messages of love, combined with Aphrodite's power to inspire that love in the first place, made them a formidable team in the complex politics of divine relationships. However, their most significant contribution to mythology wasn't their romance itself, but rather its offspring. From their union came Hermaphroditus, a deity whose very existence challenged traditional concepts of gender and identity. This child would inherit qualities from both parents: Aphrodite's beauty and power over love, and Hermes' cleverness and ability to transcend boundaries. The story of Hermaphroditus adds another layer to understanding the relationship between his divine parents. When the young god encountered the nymph Salmacis, who became obsessed with him, her prayers to be united with him forever were answered in an unexpected way. The gods merged their bodies into one being that possessed both male and female characteristics, creating a new form of deity that represented the unity of opposites. This transformation reflected the nature of Hermes and Aphrodite's own relationship, a union that transcended traditional boundaries and created something entirely new. Just as their child became a bridge between masculine and feminine, their love affair bridged the gap between different types of divine power and influence. Furthermore, the relationship between Hermes and Aphrodite illustrates how love in the divine realm operated on multiple levels simultaneously. It wasn't merely about physical attraction or emotional connection, but about the combination of complementary powers that could reshape reality itself. Their affair demonstrated that even among the gods, the most meaningful relationships were those that enhanced and amplified each participant's unique abilities. Yet, despite the significance of their union, the relationship between Hermes and Aphrodite appears to have been more of a cosmic collaboration than a deeply personal romance. Unlike her other great loves, which were marked by intense passion, jealousy, or tragedy, her connection with Hermes seems to have been characterized by mutual respect and shared purpose. This doesn't diminish the importance of their relationship, but rather highlights a different aspect of Aphrodite's nature. With Hermes, she could explore love as a creative and transformative force rather than as a source of drama and conflict. Their union represented the productive potential of desire when channeled through wisdom and communication rather than raw passion alone. Additionally, their relationship serves as a reminder that Aphrodite's influence extended beyond the realm of romantic love into areas of creativity, transformation, and divine collaboration. With Hermes, she could access his domains of travel, trade, and communication, expanding her own sphere of influence in ways that pure seduction couldn't achieve. The legacy of their union continues to influence how we understand both deities. Hermes gains depth through his connection to the goddess of love, revealing that his cleverness and wit weren't merely tools for trickery, but could also serve the deeper purposes of connection and transformation. Meanwhile, Aphrodite's relationship with him shows her capacity for intellectual partnership alongside emotional intensity. Consequently, while Hermes may rank fifth on our list in terms of dramatic impact, his relationship with Aphrodite provides crucial insight into the more subtle and creative aspects of divine love. Their union reminds us that the most powerful relationships aren't always the most tumultuous ones, and that true compatibility can create something entirely new and wonderful in the world. Moving from the subtle complexities of divine collaboration, we encounter one of the most tragic and complicated relationships in Greek mythology, the marriage between Aphrodite and Hephaestus, the god of fire and forge. This union, arranged by Zeus himself, represents perhaps the most fundamental mismatch in all of Olympus, yet it also reveals profound truths about the nature of love, beauty, and acceptance. The circumstances of their marriage were anything but romantic. Zeus, seeking to prevent conflict among the gods who all desired Aphrodite's hand, decided to give her to Hephaestus as a reward for the god's loyal service and incredible craftsmanship. However, this decision was also strategic. By marrying the most beautiful goddess to the most physically unappealing god, Zeus hoped to avoid the jealousy and warfare that might otherwise have erupted among her many divine suitors. From Aphrodite's perspective, the marriage was nothing short of a cosmic injustice. Here was a goddess who embodied perfect beauty and grace, forced into union with a god who was lame, scarred by fire, and covered in the soot and grime of his forge. Hephaestus had been thrown from Olympus twice, once by his mother Hera in disgust at his appearance, and once by Zeus during a family quarrel, leaving him permanently disabled and bitter about his place among the perfect Olympians. Yet, Hephaestus brought his own remarkable qualities to the marriage. As the divine craftsman, he possessed skills that were unmatched even among the gods. He could create objects of incredible beauty and power, from the golden automatons that served in his workshop to the weapons and jewelry that defined divine status. His forge produced wonders that even Aphrodite had to admire, including gifts that he lavished upon her in hopes of winning her genuine affection. Nevertheless, the fundamental incompatibility between them created a marriage filled with tension and mutual frustration. Aphrodite felt trapped by a union she had never chosen, while Hephaestus struggled with the knowledge that his wife's heart belonged elsewhere. His physical limitations made him an object of mockery among the other gods, and having the goddess of beauty as his wife only emphasized his own perceived inadequacies. The dynamics of their relationship were further complicated by the expectations placed upon them by Olympian society. As a married couple, they were expected to present a united front and fulfill certain social obligations. However, Aphrodite's nature made it virtually impossible for her to remain faithful to a husband she neither chose nor truly loved. Her very essence rebelled against the constraints of an unwanted marriage, setting the stage for the infidelities that would define their relationship. Hephaestus, for his part, was caught between his deep love for his wife and his growing awareness of her betrayals. His position as the cuckolded husband became a source of humiliation that cut deeper than any physical pain he had endured. The other gods whispered about Aphrodite's affairs, making Hephaestus acutely aware that his marriage was viewed as a cosmic joke rather than a sacred union. Despite these fundamental problems, there were moments when their relationship showed genuine potential. Hephaestus's gifts to Aphrodite demonstrated not just his skill as a craftsman, but his understanding of beauty and his desire to please her. He created jewelry that enhanced her natural radiance, weapons that complemented her power, and decorative objects that reflected her refined tastes. In these creations, he poured all of his love and longing, crafting beauty for the goddess of beauty herself. Similarly, Aphrodite occasionally showed appreciation for her husband's talents and dedication. She recognized that his love for her was genuine and unconditional, even if she couldn't reciprocate those feelings. There were times when she seemed to feel genuine affection for this devoted god who asked for nothing more than her happiness, even when that happiness came at his own expense. However, these moments of connection were ultimately overshadowed by the structural problems in their relationship. Aphrodite's affairs became increasingly bold and public, while Hephaestus's attempts to address the situation only brought more humiliation upon himself. The most famous example of this dynamic would come later, with her affair with Ares, but the pattern was established early in their marriage. The tragedy of their relationship lies not in any inherent evil on either side, but in the impossibility of their situation. Hephaestus deserved a wife who could love him for who he was, while Aphrodite deserved the freedom to choose her own romantic destiny. Instead, they were trapped in a marriage that satisfied neither of their deepest needs, creating resentment and pain that affected not just them, but the entire divine community. Furthermore, their marriage serves as a commentary on the nature of arranged relationships and the assumption that compatibility can be imposed from without. Zeus's well-intentioned attempt to solve one problem created a host of others, demonstrating that even divine wisdom has its limitations when it comes to matters of the heart. The relationship between Hephaestus and Aphrodite also highlights the complex interplay between different types of value and attraction. While physical beauty and charisma certainly matter in relationships, the story suggests that shared values, mutual respect, and emotional compatibility are equally important. Hephaestus's devotion and skill couldn't overcome the fundamental mismatch in their temperaments and desires. Moreover, their marriage illustrates how societal expectations and public perception can add additional stress to already difficult relationships. The constant awareness that their marriage was viewed as either a joke or a tragedy by their peers made it even harder for them to find common ground or build genuine intimacy. Yet perhaps most significantly, the marriage of Hephaestus and Aphrodite reveals the limitations of love itself. Even the goddess of love couldn't simply will herself to feel romantic attraction where it didn't naturally exist. This suggests that love, despite its power to transform and transcend, still operates according to certain natural laws that even the gods cannot violate. Consequently, while their marriage was marked by pain and disappointment, it also contributed to both deities' character development. Hephaestus learned to channel his emotional pain into his craft, creating even more beautiful and powerful objects. Aphrodite, meanwhile, gained a deeper understanding of the complexity of human relationships and the importance of choosing partners who truly complement one's nature. Their relationship ultimately serves as both a cautionary tale about the dangers of forced compatibility and a poignant reminder that even the gods struggle with the fundamental challenges of love, marriage, and mutual understanding. Leaving behind the complexities of divine marriage, we now turn to one of the most consequential love affairs in all of mythology: Aphrodite's passionate romance with Anchises, a mortal Trojan prince whose union with the goddess would literally change the course of history. This relationship demonstrates Aphrodite's willingness to cross the ultimate boundary that between divine and mortal in pursuit of love, and shows how even brief encounters with the gods can have far-reaching consequences for generations to come. The story begins on the slopes of Mount Ida, near the ancient city of Troy, where Anchises served as a shepherd and minor prince in the royal household. Unlike the great heroes whose fame echoed throughout the ancient world, Anchises was notable primarily for his extraordinary beauty and his quiet dignity. He possessed the kind of natural nobility that needed no crown or scepter to command respect, and his physical appearance was so striking that it caught the attention of goddesses themselves. Aphrodite first encountered Anchises while traveling through the Trojan countryside, and she was immediately struck by his remarkable appearance. Here was a mortal who possessed beauty that rivaled even the gods, combined with a strength and grace that spoke to both his royal bloodline and his honest work as a shepherd. Moreover, there was something about his character, a combination of humility and quiet confidence that appealed to the goddess in ways that neither divine perfection nor heroic boasting could match. What made this attraction particularly significant was that it represented a genuine choice on Aphrodite's part. Unlike her arranged marriage to Hephaestus or her destined conflicts with other divine beings, her desire for Anchises was pure and uncomplicated. She saw him, wanted him, and was free to pursue that desire without the complex politics and expectations that governed relationships among the gods. However, pursuing a mortal lover presented unique challenges even for the goddess of love. The gulf between divine and human existence was vast, and crossing it required careful consideration of the consequences. Mortals who encountered gods directly often found the experience overwhelming or even deadly. The sheer power and otherness of divine beings could burn through human consciousness like fire through paper, leaving madness or death in their wake. Therefore, Aphrodite approached Anchises with unusual care and subtlety. Rather than appearing in her full divine glory, she disguised herself as a mortal princess, claiming to be a Phrygian noble who had been carried off by Hermes and set down near his flocks. This deception allowed her to interact with Anchises on seemingly equal terms, testing his character and building genuine emotional connection before revealing her true nature. The courtship that followed was remarkably tender and human in its details. Aphrodite, playing the role of a lost princess, allowed Anchises to show his natural kindness and hospitality. He offered her shelter, food, and protection without expecting anything in return, demonstrating the nobility of character that had first attracted her attention. Their conversations revealed his intelligence, his deep connection to the land and its traditions, and his genuine care for the people under his protection. As their relationship deepened, Aphrodite found herself experiencing emotions that were surprisingly unfamiliar. With other lovers, divine or mortal, she had always maintained a certain degree of detachment. Love was her domain, but it was also her tool and her weapon. With Anchises, however, she discovered what it meant to be vulnerable in love, to care more about another's happiness than her own pleasure or power. This vulnerability became even more profound when she finally revealed her true identity to him. The scene of this revelation, as described in the Homeric hymn to Aphrodite, is one of the most beautiful and moving passages in ancient literature. Aphrodite appears to Anchises in her true form, radiant with divine beauty, and explains how she has fallen in love with him as both goddess and woman. Anchises' reaction to this revelation reveals much about his character. Rather than being overcome with terror or trying to exploit his divine connection for personal gain, he responds with appropriate awe mixed with genuine human emotion. He understands the magnitude of what has happened, but remains focused on the relationship they have built, rather than the power dynamics it implies. Their union, when it finally occurs, is described as a meeting of equals, despite their vastly different natures. Aphrodite doesn't dominate or overwhelm her mortal lover, nor does she condescend to him. Instead, she allows herself to experience love as mortals do, with all the joy, vulnerability, and uncertainty that entails. For a brief time, the goddess of love becomes simply a woman in love. The consequences of their affair extend far beyond their personal happiness. From their union comes Aeneas, one of the greatest heroes of the Trojan War and the legendary founder of the Roman people. This child will carry both his mother's divine protection and his father's mortal courage into a destiny that will reshape the Mediterranean world. Through Aeneas, the love affair between Aphrodite and Anchises becomes the foundation for an empire that will dominate the ancient world for centuries, yet the price of their love is steep. Aphrodite knows that their relationship cannot last in any conventional sense. The difference in their natures means that while she will remain eternally young and beautiful, Anchises will age and die. Moreover, the birth of their child has attracted the attention of Zeus, who disapproves of such intimate connections between gods and mortals. The aftermath of their affair reveals both the rewards and the costs of crossing divine boundaries. Anchises is struck by Zeus's lightning as punishment for his relationship with the goddess, leaving him lame and weakened. Some versions of the myth suggest this happened because he boasted about his divine lover, while others indicate it was simply the inevitable consequence of mortal flesh coming into too close contact with divine power. Aphrodite, for her part, faces restrictions on her ability to maintain relationships with mortals. Zeus warns her against further such entanglements, threatening consequences that would extend beyond just herself to affect the mortals she might choose to love. This limitation adds a poignant note to her character development. The goddess, of love finds herself constrained in her own romantic choices by the very power structure she serves. Nevertheless, the relationship between Aphrodite and Anchises represents one of the most successful cross-species romances in Greek mythology. Unlike many such affairs which end in tragedy or transformation, theirs produces lasting positive results. Their son Aeneas will carry his parents' legacy forward, combining divine favor with human determination to achieve great things. The story also demonstrates how love can serve as a bridge between different worlds and different ways of being. Through her relationship with Anchises, Aphrodite gains a deeper understanding of mortal experience, the urgency that comes from limited time, the preciousness that stems from vulnerability, and the courage required to love despite uncertainty about the future. Similarly, Anchises is elevated through his connection with the divine, not just in status, but in understanding. His experience with Aphrodite gives him insights into the nature of reality and the workings of fate that will serve him well as the father of a hero. He learns that mortals can interact with gods as equals in the realm of love, even if that equality is temporary and comes with significant costs. Furthermore, their relationship illustrates the creative potential of love when it crosses traditional boundaries. Rather than destroying or diminishing either participant, their union creates something new and valuable. Not just their child Aeneas, but a new understanding of how different forms of existence can complement and enhance each other. The legacy of Aphrodite and Anchises extends far beyond the mythological realm into literature, art, and cultural identity. Their story becomes a template for understanding how the divine and human realms can interact productively, and how love can serve as a force for historical change rather than just personal fulfillment. Consequently, while their affair may rank third on our list in terms of duration and dramatic complexity, its historical and cultural significance places it among the most important love stories ever told. It reminds us that the most meaningful relationships often involve risk, sacrifice, and the willingness to transcend the boundaries that normally define our lives. As we ascend to the second position in our exploration of Aphrodite's greatest loves, we encounter perhaps the most tragic and beautiful romance in all of Greek mythology. Her passionate, all-consuming affair with Adonis, the mortal youth whose beauty was so extraordinary that it literally conquered death itself. This relationship reveals Aphrodite at her most vulnerable and desperate, showing how even the goddess of love could be reduced to mortal-like suffering when faced with the loss of her beloved. The origins of Adonis himself are steeped in tragedy and taboo, making his eventual fate seem almost inevitable. Born from the incestuous union of Myrrha and her father Cinyras, king of Cyprus, Adonis entered the world as both a blessing and a curse. His mother, driven by Aphrodite's own curse, to experience uncontrollable desire for her father, had tricked Cinyras into the relationship that produced this extraordinary child. When the deception was discovered, Myrrha fled in shame and was transformed into a myrrh tree from which Adonis was born 10 months later. Even as an infant, Adonis possessed beauty that was clearly supernatural in its perfection. When Aphrodite first laid eyes upon the child, she was immediately overwhelmed by his potential. Here was a being who could grow up to embody everything she valued: physical perfection, natural grace, and an almost magnetic appeal that drew all living things toward him. She knew instantly that this child would become either her greatest joy or her deepest sorrow, and as it turned out, he would become both. Unable to resist her protective instincts, Aphrodite placed the infant Adonis in a chest and entrusted him to Persephone, queen of the underworld, for safekeeping. This decision would later prove to be both wise and catastrophic. Persephone was meant to guard the child without looking upon him, but curiosity eventually overcame caution. When she opened the chest and saw Adonis, she too fell under the spell of his extraordinary beauty and refused to give him back to Aphrodite when the time came. This created the first great conflict over Adonis, as two of the most powerful goddesses in the Greek pantheon found themselves competing for the love of a mortal youth. The dispute became so intense that Zeus himself had to intervene, creating a judgment that would divide Adonis's time between the upper world with Aphrodite, the underworld with Persephone, and a portion of the year when he could choose his own company. Predictably, Adonis chose to spend his free time with Aphrodite as well, a decision that only intensified Persephone's jealousy and set the stage for future tragedy. As Adonis matured into young manhood, his beauty became legendary throughout the ancient world. Poets struggled to find words adequate to describe his appearance, often resorting to comparisons with the gods themselves or with natural phenomena like the dawn or the first flowers of spring. His beauty was said to be so perfect that it seemed almost ethereal, as if he were a living artwork rather than a flesh and blood mortal. Yet Adonis was more than just a beautiful face. He possessed a love of nature and outdoor pursuits that complemented his physical gifts. He was an accomplished hunter, a skilled athlete, and a young man who seemed to embody the very essence of youth and vitality. His laughter could brighten the darkest day. His presence could calm wild animals, and his very being seemed to radiate the kind of joy and energy that made others feel more alive simply by being near him. For Aphrodite, Adonis represented something she had never experienced before, a love that was completely pure and uncomplicated by politics, power, or divine obligation. With him, she could simply be a woman in love rather than a goddess managing complex relationships and cosmic responsibilities. She found herself abandoning her usual duties to spend time with her beloved, neglecting her temples and ignoring the prayers of her worshippers in favor of long days spent in pastoral bliss. Their relationship developed into something that transcended the usual boundaries between divine and mortal love. Aphrodite would disguise herself as a mortal huntress to accompany Adonis on his expeditions, reveling in the simple pleasure of his company without the complications that usually attended her divine status. She learned to appreciate the mortal perspective on time and mortality, understanding for the first time how precious each moment could be when viewed against the backdrop of limited lifespan. Moreover, through Adonis, Aphrodite discovered aspects of love that her immortal nature had previously made impossible to experience. She felt genuine fear for his safety, knowing that his mortal flesh was vulnerable in ways that divine bodies were not. She experienced jealousy not over power or status, but over the simple possibility that others might capture his attention or affection. Most importantly, she learned what it meant to love someone more than she loved herself. The intensity of their relationship was such that it became the subject of gossip and concern throughout Olympus. Other gods noted Aphrodite's increasing distraction and wondered whether her obsession with a mortal lover was affecting her judgment and her ability to fulfill her cosmic responsibilities. Some viewed her devotion as touching evidence of love's power, while others saw it as a dangerous abandonment of divine duty. As their love deepened, Aphrodite became increasingly protective of Adonis, warning him constantly about the dangers that surrounded mortal life. She was particularly concerned about his passion for hunting, knowing that the wild boars and other creatures he pursued could easily kill even the most skilled hunter. Her divine knowledge allowed her to see the threads of fate gathering around her beloved, and she sensed that tragedy was approaching despite all her efforts to prevent it. The source of that approaching tragedy lay in the jealousy and resentment that their perfect love had inspired in others. Persephone, still bitter about losing Adonis to Aphrodite, began plotting revenge. More dangerously, Ares, the god of war and Aphrodite's former lover, was consumed with jealousy over her obvious devotion to the mortal youth. The intensity of Aphrodite's love for Adonis made clear that whatever she had felt for Ares paled in comparison, wounding his divine pride in ways that would demand satisfaction. The final tragedy began on a day that seemed no different from any other. Adonis set out for a hunting expedition despite Aphrodite's pleas that he remain safely at home. She had experienced disturbing dreams and omens that filled her with dread, but Adonis, with the confidence of youth, dismissed her concerns as the overprotectiveness of a worried lover. He kissed her goodbye and promised to return before sunset, not knowing that he was walking toward his destiny. The hunt that day led Adonis deep into the forest, where he encountered a massive wild boar of unusual size and ferocity. Unknown to the young hunter, this was no ordinary animal but a creature sent by either Ares or Persephone. The myths vary on which deity was ultimately responsible to bring about his destruction. The boar attacked with supernatural fury, and despite Adonis's skill and courage, mortal flesh proved no match for divine vengeance. When Aphrodite felt the moment of her beloved's death, she let out a cry of anguish that echoed across both heaven and earth. Abandoning all dignity and divine protocol, she rushed to the scene of the tragedy, arriving just in time to hold Adonis as his life ebbed away. Her tears mixed with his blood as she desperately tried to use her divine power to heal his wounds. But even the goddess of love could not reverse the work of death once it was completed. The scene of Aphrodite mourning over Adonis's body became one of the most powerful and enduring images in ancient art and literature. Here was the goddess of love, reduced to very human grief, her divine beauty twisted by anguish as she refused to accept the reality of her loss. She held his body and whispered promises of eternal love, vowing that death would not be the end of their story. In her grief, Aphrodite performed one of the most touching acts of memorial in all of mythology. She transformed Adonis's spilled blood into anemone flowers, ensuring that his beauty would return to the world each spring. These delicate red blooms, which appear briefly and then fade, became a symbol of both the beauty and the fragility of mortal life. Through this transformation, Aphrodite ensured that lovers throughout history would be reminded of both the joy and the sorrow that love can bring. But Aphrodite's love for Adonis proved stronger than death itself. She negotiated with the powers of the underworld, eventually securing an arrangement similar to the one that governed Persephone's annual return to the upper world. For part of each year, Adonis would return from the dead to spend time with his divine lover, making their romance literally eternal, despite the tragedy that had seemingly ended it. This annual resurrection of Adonis became the basis for mystery, religions and seasonal festivals throughout the ancient world. His death and rebirth symbolized the cycle of the seasons, the eternal return of spring after winter, and the hope that love could triumph over even the ultimate separation. Worshippers would mourn his death and celebrate his return, participating in a cosmic drama that connected their own experiences of love and loss to the divine realm. The relationship between Aphrodite and Adonis thus transcends simple romance, to become a meditation on the nature of beauty, mortality, and the power of love to transform even tragedy into something meaningful and enduring. Their story demonstrates that the most profound love often involves the greatest risk, and that true devotion can find ways to continue even beyond the boundaries of life and death. Furthermore, this relationship reveals aspects of Aphrodite's character that appear nowhere else in Greek mythology. With Adonis, She shows a capacity for selfless devotion that goes far beyond her usual concern with pleasure and power. Her willingness to grieve publicly, to negotiate with death itself, and to ensure his annual return, demonstrates love as a creative and transformative force rather than simply a source of desire or conflict. The tragic beauty of their story has inspired countless works of art, literature, and music throughout history. From ancient Greek poetry to Renaissance paintings to modern novels and films, the love affair between Aphrodite and Adonis continues to serve as a template for understanding how beauty, love, and mortality intersect in the human experience. Consequently, while their relationship may have been cut short by tragedy, its impact on both mythology and culture has been eternal. Adonis earns his place as Aphrodite's second greatest love, not just because of the intensity of their passion, but because their story reveals the ultimate power of love to transcend even death itself, creating beauty and meaning that endures long after the lovers themselves have passed into legend. At the pinnacle of our exploration stands the most explosive, passionate, and publicly scandalous love affair in all of Greek mythology: the tempestuous relationship between Aphrodite and Ares, the god of war. This was not merely a romance, but a cosmic collision between opposing forces that would define both deities for eternity and create one of the most humiliating spectacles ever witnessed on Mount Olympus. Their affair represents everything that made Aphrodite simultaneously irresistible and dangerous: her complete disregard for convention, her ability to transform even the most hardened warrior into a lovesick fool, and her power to turn the very foundations of divine society upside down. The attraction between Aphrodite and Ares was perhaps inevitable, representing the eternal dance between love and war that has captivated human imagination since the dawn of civilization. Where Aphrodite embodied beauty, pleasure, and the creative force of desire, Ares represented raw power, violence, and the destructive energy of conflict. Yet rather than repelling each other, these opposing forces created a magnetic attraction that neither deity could resist. From Ares's perspective, Aphrodite represented everything his violent nature couldn't obtain through force. Her beauty was the one prize that couldn't be won through battle. Her affection, the one victory that required surrender rather than conquest. The god who could inspire terror in mortals and immortals alike found himself completely helpless before the goddess of love, willing to abandon his dignity, his reputation, and his principles for just a moment of her attention. For Aphrodite, Ares offered something equally irresistible: passion without restraint, desire without consequence, and a lover whose intensity could match her own. Unlike her dutiful but unexciting husband Hephaestus, or her tragic mortal lovers who required her protection, Ares was her equal in power and her superior in raw, unbridled passion. With him, she could explore the darker, more dangerous aspects of love without fear of breaking her partner or overwhelming him with her divine nature. Their affair began in secret, conducted in hidden groves, secluded chambers, and shadowy corners of Olympus, where they believed themselves safe from observation. The intensity of their passion was such that they often forgot their surroundings entirely, lost in a world where only their desire for each other mattered. These stolen moments became the stuff of legend, described by later poets as encounters, so charged with divine energy that they could cause earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and sudden changes in weather patterns. The secrecy itself added to the excitement of their relationship. Both deities were accustomed to getting whatever they wanted through their respective powers, but this affair required them to be careful, subtle, and vulnerable in ways that were completely foreign to their natures. The need to hide their meetings created an intimacy that went beyond physical attraction, They became co-conspirators in a cosmic deception that bound them together in ways that simple desire could not. Moreover, their relationship revealed new facets of both their personalities. Ares, typically portrayed as brutal and single-minded in his pursuit of conflict, showed a capacity for tenderness and romantic devotion that surprised even himself. He would arrive at their secret meetings, bearing gifts of flowers instead of weapons, composing clumsy but heartfelt poetry instead of battle plans, and displaying a vulnerability that he would never show on any battlefield. Aphrodite, in turn, discovered that her appreciation for beauty and pleasure could be enhanced by a touch of danger and unpredictability. Ares's fierce devotion awakened something primal in her nature that her other relationships had never touched. With him, she could be not just the goddess of love, but the goddess of passionate, consuming desire that recognized no boundaries or limitations. Their secret affair produced several children, each of whom embodied different aspects of their parents' combined natures. Eros, the god of sexual love, inherited his mother's power over desire and his father's ability to strike without warning. Anteros represented reciprocal love and requited affection, while Himeros embodied the immediate, overwhelming rush of sexual attraction. Phobos and Deimos, the personifications of fear and panic, showed how love and war could combine to create terror in the hearts of both mortals and gods. These children served as living evidence of the creative potential unleashed when opposing forces unite in harmony. Each deity represented a different aspect of the complex relationship between love and conflict, showing how passion could manifest as both creation and destruction, devotion and obsession, ecstasy and terror. However, the very intensity that made their relationship so compelling also made it impossible to contain indefinitely. The other gods began to notice Ares's frequent absences from his duties, his distracted behavior during important meetings, and his newfound interest in subjects that had nothing to do with warfare. Similarly, Aphrodite's neglect of her marriage to Hephaestus became increasingly obvious as she grew more bold in her infidelity. The situation reached a crisis point when Helios, the all-seeing sun god, finally witnessed one of their secret meetings and decided to inform Hephaestus of his wife's betrayal. The reasons for Helios's decision remain unclear. Some sources suggest he was motivated by a sense of justice, while others imply he was seeking revenge for some slight from either Aphrodite or Ares. Regardless of his motivations, his revelation set in motion a chain of events that would create one of the most notorious scandals in Greek mythology. Hephaestus's reaction to the news of his wife's affair was complex and devastating. Rather than confronting the lovers directly or seeking immediate revenge, he channeled his rage and humiliation into his greatest work of craftsmanship. A trap so ingenious and inescapable that it would expose the affair to the ridicule of all Olympus. Using his unmatched skills as a divine smith, he forged a net of golden chains, so fine they were nearly invisible, yet so strong that not even the gods could break them. The god carefully positioned this trap around the bed where Aphrodite and Ares conducted their meetings, waiting for the perfect moment to spring it. When the lovers next came together, consumed by their passion and oblivious to their surroundings, the net fell upon them, binding them together in a compromising position, from which they could not escape. Hephaestus then summoned all the gods of Olympus to witness his wife's infidelity and his own humiliation. The scene that followed became one of the most infamous episodes in Greek mythology. The assembled gods found Aphrodite and Ares trapped, together, naked and helpless, their divine dignity stripped away along with their clothing. The reaction of the divine audience varied from shocked silence to barely concealed amusement, But all were struck by the dramatic reversal of fortune that had befallen two of Olympus's most powerful residents. Some of the gods, particularly the goddesses, were scandalized by the public exposure and refused to look upon the trapped lovers. Others, especially the male deities, found the situation amusing rather than tragic, making jokes about Ares's conquest being conquered and Aphrodite's beauty being displayed for all to see. The humiliation was complete when several gods began making light of the situation, suggesting that they wouldn't mind being trapped in such circumstances themselves. The immediate aftermath of this exposure was catastrophic for both lovers. Ares, the fearsome god of war, became a laughingstock throughout Olympus. His reputation as an unstoppable force of destruction was permanently damaged by the image of him helplessly entangled in golden chains, reduced to pleading for release like a common prisoner. The mockery he endured from his fellow gods cut deeper than any wound he had received in battle. Aphrodite's humiliation was equally profound, but different in character. As the goddess of love and beauty, she was accustomed to being desired and admired, but always on her own terms. The public exposure stripped away her mystique and reduced her to an object of gossip and speculation. The very qualities that made her powerful, her beauty, her sexuality, her ability to inspire desire, became sources of shame when displayed against her will. The consequences of their affair extended far beyond personal embarrassment. Zeus, already concerned about the disruptive effects of romantic entanglements among the gods, used the scandal as an opportunity to impose stricter regulations on divine behavior. The affair between Aphrodite and Ares became a cautionary tale about the dangers of uncontrolled passion and the importance of maintaining proper relationships within the divine hierarchy. Yet despite the public humiliation and official disapproval, the love between Aphrodite and Ares proved remarkably resilient. Once released from Hephaestus's trap, they initially attempted to end their relationship, but the passion that had driven them together proved stronger than their shame or fear of further consequences. They resumed their affair, though with greater care and discretion than before. Their continued relationship after the scandal revealed the true depth of their connection. This was not merely physical attraction or temporary infatuation, but a bond that could survive public ridicule, divine punishment, and personal humiliation. The fact that they were willing to risk further scandal and punishment to be together demonstrated that their love, whatever its complications, was genuine and enduring. The long-term impact of their relationship on both deities was profound and lasting. Ares never again achieved the same level of fear and respect that he had enjoyed before the scandal, but he gained something perhaps more valuable: a deeper understanding of vulnerability and the complex emotions that drive both love and war. His relationship with Aphrodite humanized him in ways that made him more relatable to mortals, even if it diminished his standing among the gods. Aphrodite, meanwhile, learned that even the goddess of love was not immune to the consequences of her actions. The scandal taught her that power and beauty could not shield her from judgment or protect her from the results of her choices. This knowledge added depth and complexity to her character, making her more than just a symbol of desire and beauty. The story of Aphrodite and Ares has resonated throughout history as the ultimate tale of forbidden love and public scandal. Their affair represents the eternal tension between passion and propriety, between the heart's desires and society's expectations. The fact that their love survived public humiliation and divine punishment speaks to the power of authentic connection, to transcend even the most difficult circumstances. Furthermore, their relationship illustrates how opposing forces can create something greater than the sum of their parts. Love and war, beauty and violence, creation and destruction, These seemingly contradictory elements combined in Aphrodite and Ares to produce a relationship that was both destructive and creative, shameful and glorious, tragic and triumphant. The legacy of their affair extends far beyond the realm of mythology into art, literature, and popular culture. The image of the lovers caught in Hephaestus's trap has inspired countless artistic interpretations, from ancient Greek pottery to Renaissance paintings to modern films and novels. Their story serves as a template for understanding how scandal and passion intersect in both divine and human relationships. Consequently, Ares earns his place as Aphrodite's greatest lover, not just because of the intensity of their passion or the drama of their affair, but because their relationship fundamentally changed both of them and left an indelible mark on the mythology and culture of the ancient world. Their love story reminds us that the most powerful relationships are often the most dangerous ones, and that true passion always comes with a price that must be paid. As we reach the end of our journey through the passionate, tragic, and transformative love affairs of Aphrodite, we find ourselves with a deeper understanding not just of the goddess herself, but of the very nature of love, desire, and human connection. Each of these relationships, from the subtle collaboration with Hermes to the scandalous passion with Ares, reveals different facets of both divine and mortal experience. What emerges from these stories is a portrait of love as a force that recognizes no boundaries, not between divine and mortal, not between appropriate and inappropriate, not between creation and destruction. Aphrodite's affairs demonstrate that authentic passion cannot be contained by social conventions, divine laws, or even the natural order of life and death. Love, in all its forms, demands expression regardless of the consequences. Moreover, these tales remind us that even the gods struggle with the same fundamental challenges that face all lovers: the balance between freedom and commitment, the tension between desire and duty, the pain of loss and the joy of connection. Aphrodite's relationships show us that power and beauty cannot shield anyone from the vulnerabilities that come with opening one's heart to another. The enduring appeal of these stories lies in their combination of the extraordinary and the universal. While few of us will ever experience the drama of being trapped in golden nets, or the tragedy of loving someone who dies and returns seasonally, we can all relate to the emotions that drive these narratives. The excitement of forbidden attraction, the pain of unrequited love, the joy of mutual passion, and the sorrow of inevitable loss. Perhaps most importantly, Aphrodite's love affairs teach us that the most meaningful relationships are often the most challenging ones. Her greatest loves, Ares, Adonis, Anchises, all required her to risk something precious, to grow beyond her comfort zone, and to accept vulnerability as the price of authentic connection. In each case, she emerged changed by the experience. More complex and complete as both a goddess and a character, these ancient stories continue to resonate with modern audiences because they capture fundamental truths about the human condition. Love remains as powerful, as dangerous, and as essential today as it was in ancient Greece. The goddess of love's adventures remind us that passion is worth pursuing despite its risks, that beauty is found in both joy and sorrow, and that the greatest love stories are those that transform everyone involved. As we close this exploration of divine romance, we're left with a profound appreciation for the complexity and power of love itself. Through Aphrodite's eyes, we see that love is not just an emotion or a biological drive, but a creative force that can reshape reality, bridge impossible divides, and create meaning from chaos. Her lovers each contributed something unique to this understanding, making her not just the goddess of love, but love's greatest student and teacher. In the end, Aphrodite's legacy reminds us that love, in all its forms, remains the most powerful force in both the divine and mortal realms. Whether we're gods or humans, we all seek connection, meaning, and the transformative power that comes from truly seeing and being seen by another. These ancient tales of passion and loss, triumph and tragedy, continue to guide us in our own search for love that transcends the ordinary and touches the divine. The goddess of love and her legendary affairs thus serve as both entertainment and instruction, reminding us that the heart's desires, however dangerous or inconvenient, deserve our attention and respect. In pursuing love with courage and authenticity, we honor not just Aphrodite's legacy, but the deepest and most essential aspects of our own humanity.